the last time you were here, we celebrated your book, The Boy Crisis. We had such an important conversation. I still think about that conversation to this day, and I cite it regularly. It was so important.
What is there about it that made you sort of...
That resonated?
Yeah, that resonated.
Well, as a boy, and as somebody who's, alive and surviving and attempting to thrive in the 21st century amid a very apparent mental health crisis, I think it's an interesting angle to take on that crisis, and to the fact that you've elucidated so clearly the unique considerations for the mental health of boys and men. The data you brought, the insights, but also just you being you, there are very few advocates.
Yes.
There are too precious few advocates for the mental health of boys today. And so that's why I so appreciate your work.
Thank you. Well, as you know, I evolved into advocacy. I was sort of the world leading male feminist, if you will, for a while. And so I began to start seeing boys and having problems and nobody paying attention to them. And that when when I began to elucidate the evidence for it, the reaction was, well, boys may have problems now, but they'll become men, and as men, they'll be, have privilege, and they'll be part of the patriarchy, and they'll be oppressors, and they'll have all the advantages in life. And so why do you want to take resources away from girls and women when they're the ones that really need it and put it into boys and men? And I thought, wow, that is such an incredibly sort of zero-sum game attitude toward males and females. When boys have problems when men have problems with sperm counts, they produce unhealthy children. Half of those unhealthy children are women or females. When boys don't graduate from high school and don't go to college nearly as much as females do, females feel like, gee, they're having to compete against a lot of females for a small number of men. That doesn't make the females feel good. I mean, it's sort of like when only one sex wins, both sexes lose. And it was such a narrow perspective, and yet to feel the resistance of every gender studies course practically in the country, and then almost all the mainstream media, just sort of, I went from being a hero to you must be suddenly misogynist. It was like, no, I just care about everybody in the family, not just one gender.
It's crazy, yeah. And there's a certain narrative that's being pushed today that certain forms of masculinity are toxic, which I don't believe. I believe there are toxic people, and there are people who are completely well-adjusted and highly masculine and strong, and they're protectors and providers. And but there's this narrative that's being pushed that women, in certain pockets don't need men, and that can potentially lead to boys and girls being dad deprived. And I learned about the consequences of that from
that was
conversation.
That was the single biggest thing that surprised me in my research, was seeing that when I presented the Boy Crisis book to the publisher, I had 10 chapters that each were devoted to one, quote, cause. And as I started researching the causes, I realized that most of them were secondary causes, maybe contributors, I would say. So, for example, if you have a small number of males in school as teachers, that contributes, but it only contributed to the boys who didn't have males at home, the dad-deprived boys. And so when a boy went from a female-only home to a pretty much female-only school, that's when they were sort of male role model deprived or constructive male role model deprived. And then they started looking for other role models like gangs, or they wouldn't be nearly as productive in high school, and so therefore they'd end up flipping hamburgers. And so some drug dealer would say, "You want to make 10 times the amount you're making? You have a nice car, you can attract girls, that type of thing." And so they'd be sucked into the drug dealership. And so, but it was almost always the dad-deprived boys. That were, the school shooters were not just almost all males, but also dad-deprived males to about an 85% level.
It's crazy. Well, yeah, that conversation was definitely one of my favorites in recent memory. But I'm excited to talk about your new book, Rollmate to Soulmate, which seems like a bit of a departure. But I'm super excited to get into it. So why do you write this new book? What's it about? And what would you say the biggest mistakes are today that people make when dating?
Yes, I'll do the departure part first. So what I saw was that the boy crisis very frequently happened from dad deprivation. Dad deprivation very frequently happened in divorce situations. Divorces often happen because there was a lack of understanding between men and women. And the Achilles heel of almost all human beings was our inability to handle personal criticism without becoming defensive. So I began to look at that and realized that historically and biologically, when you heard criticism, there was a potential for experiencing an enemy. And so in order to survive, you wanted to get up your defenses or alternatively, kill the enemy before the enemy killed you. And so that was very functional for survival. It was just dysfunctional for love. And so I began to look into, well, if people at Gottman had said, well, there should be things like active listening. But active listening was wonderful for the person expressing the problem. But when she or he expressed a problem, the person, their partner, experienced them as criticizing them. So without their defenses, their natural defenses, they had to take in the criticism of their partner. And then active listening required you to repeat the criticism. So you were not only going against nature to accept the criticism and then repeat the criticism, but it was good for the person who was criticizing. It was just terrible for the person being criticized. And the result of that, Gottman in the Munich marital study and other studies found that nobody was using active listening unless they had the guidance of a counselor or a therapist. And lots of people can't afford a counselor and therapist, and so it was really leaving out, millions of people that needed that type of training. Plus, it wasn't working to allow a couple on their own to be able to feel that they didn't have to walk on eggshells and watch for the exact right moment to do the criticism when everything, all the stars were aligned, etc. And so I said, I wonder if I can invent another way. And so I started looking into what I could do. And what I found was that if I could set aside just 2 hours a week and have couples appreciate each other at the beginning of those 2 hours so that they filled their reservoir of love, and then appreciate each other at the end of those 2 hours, and then in between just share one concern. The person doing the criticism usually didn't call it a criticism, they called it sharing a concern. The person experiencing the sharing of their partner's concern called it a criticism. But before they did that, they had to make themselves, the person receiving the criticism had to make himself or herself safe. So then the question was, how do they do that, making themselves safe? So I started developing a series of mindsets. And to do that, the first mindset was I would ask everybody in the room, every couple in the room, this could be straight couples or gay couples, it can be parents and children, couples, any two people that had a past where they loved each other that ran into problems and they wanted to have a future where they could love each other more deeply and run into fewer problems. And so I'd have the couples sit back to back and write down on a piece of paper the answer to this question. If you were experiencing the possibility that your partner was going to die, and with 100% certainty that your partner was going to die, either in, let's say, drowning or a car accident, and you knew with 100% certainty you had the capacity or the ability to save your partner's life, but you would have a 50% chance of losing your own life in the process, would you do it? Yes, no, uncertain. And so then I would ask, if you weren't willing to lose your life, would you be willing to lose an arm or a leg? So they had those choices. So then after they did that, they were guaranteed ahead of time. Oh, the one caveat was that do not make believe you don't have children. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that issue. So then I would assure them ahead of time that their partner would never see the answer to this question. And so they all did this, and then I had them throw their pieces of paper into corners of the circle. The men and women mixed the papers up, and each of the men took out a piece of the paper and read, yes, no, uncertain. And so the men usually have about a 90% likelihood of saying, yes, I would give up my life for my partner's life. The women, a little bit over 80%. And so this was pretty amazing, and so then the first mindset before they heard their partner's criticism was to sort of meditate and in a somewhat altered state saying, well, if I'm willing to die for you, the least I can do is listen to you. So that put listening to criticism in perspective.
Puts things in perspective, yeah.
Yes. Then I would have them do a second mindset, which was called the love guarantee. And so before they heard their partner's concern, they'd say, if I provide a safe environment for you to be able to say anything you want, in whatever way you want, whether I consider it a lie, an exaggeration, I don't like your tone of voice, no matter what tone of voice or story you have, I will be totally there for you to provide a safe environment for that story. And I know that if you feel safe with me, you will feel more loved by me. And if you feel more loved by me, you'll feel more love for me. So I can actually not only not become defensive, but the more you do that criticism, the more you will feel loved. And the more, therefore, I can not only have to feel not defensive, but I can feel like every bit you go on, and the more angry you are, the more surprised you will be that I provide a safe environment, the more grateful you'll be that I provide a safe environment, the deeper your love for me will be. Well, this is really an opportunity to be more deeply loved. And so there's 4 other mindsets like that, that I have people alter their by that state, and that allows them to really provide a safe environment for their partner to say anything they want in whatever tone of voice they want and tell whatever version of their story they want. And when they're finished, they say to their partner, well, what I heard you say was this. And then it goes into a bit of active listening, which is, what I heard you say is this, and then the partner says, well, no, that's not exactly, and then you ask the question, is there anything I distorted? And the partner says, yes, maybe there's just this you distorted. And if you feel you got it right, and you said exactly that, you don't say that. You keep working at it until your partner says, that's exactly what I said, thank you. And then you ask, is there anything that I missed? And your partner says, yes, there's this, and you don't argue that. You keep working at it until your partner says, nothing missed. Now your partner is feeling secure and safe. At that point, you say to your partner, is there anything else that you'd like to add? And what I find among many couples is that they didn't think they had anything to add until they felt so safe that they realized they could start thinking thoughts inside of themselves they didn't even know they were thinking, because it wasn't functional to be thinking those thoughts out loud, because it just, you never would have a chance to say them anyway. So you just kept them to yourself, and then until some volcano exploded someday over something smaller. And so finally, and they're feeling, my goodness, after sharing my feelings, I'm being invited to say something even more. Oh God, I've just never felt this from you before, or from anybody before that I disagreed with. And so, and at the end of that process, that's usually the person being heard just feels like, I've said this, the complaint that I had, I know you've heard me say 100 times. So why am I saying it this time as well? Because I've never felt heard any of those 100 times. I've been saying it, and the other person say, we always nag about this, you always say the same thing. Well, but they've never really felt heard about it. Then the person who's been hearing, taking that criticism in, now has a chance to respond to the story, give his or her version of the story that their partner was sharing. And then the person who's now hearing the response does the exact opposite. She or he just moves into an altered state and does the 6 mindsets before they hear that altered response. And that is what I call a caring and sharing session. But before people do the caring and sharing session, I basically say, don't do any of these sharings of concerns until you feel appreciated. And appreciated doesn't mean what we normally define as appreciated. It means, like, let's say you're at Thanksgiving dinner and you're saying to the family, Mom's really a great cook, or my wife is really a great cook. Instead of saying that's an appreciation, but what I teach people to do is to make that appreciation more and more specific. So, Mom's a great cook. Look how good the turkey was. And look how crisp the skin was. And how did you get the skin so crisp? And then still the dressing was so moist at the same time as the skin was so crisp. How do you make that combination happen? So you're expressing appreciation and curiosity about the sort of genius, if you will, that this person had to do that. And then you move to the next level of saying, like, I'm noticing the spicing here was really good. Now, again, more specific. Like, was that parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme, or some other Simon and Garfunkel spice?
Yeah, the more specific you can be, the more interest it shows that you've taken into
exactly
what it is they've done.
And then when you say something like, I would love to have the recipe, it really sounds totally motivated and sincere, and you get this, and the person feels really like seen. And very often people go through a lot of life without being seen at those what I call 7 levels of specificity. That the secret sauce of appreciation is your partner, your loved one, digging in and really disciplining themselves to become specific.
And so really showing that the other person is appreciated, is safe, is loved, paves the path to being able to express a concern where it's not taken as criticism and it's not responded to defensively.
Exactly. And the trick is in knowing how to do that, and knowing before you even get into that your partner, that this caring and sharing time will start with 2 appreciations of you and end with 2 appreciations of you. And so it's harder to feel even criticized when you're being appreciated before and after.
Well, it's like process. They call that a compliment sandwich.
Yeah. Oh, do they really?
I think
I call it the caring and sharing sandwich, which is really like very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. The bread being the compliment or the token of appreciation, the meat being,
the concern.
The concern.
Yes. Yes.
Among all the couples that you've studied, are there some sources of conflict, disagreements, criticisms that you find to be more common than others?
Yes. I would say first, it's a slightly different answer here, but the first major issue is when children come. And almost no one has a clue as to how much work children take. They hear it from their parents or their whatever, but they don't really get it until they experience it.
My brother just had my brother has 2 young children, 1 toddler, 1 infant, and my family's incredibly close. And so it feels like a all hands on deck effort raising these 2
nice
rugrats.
Nice.
And the amount of work is it's crazy.
It is really crazy. Liz, when I met her, my wife, she had 2 children, and it was very soon after that they had a divorce, and she had to basically raise those 2 children 90% by herself, and while she was working, and so it was really very challenging, to say the least.
Is she aware of the concept of dad deprivation?
At that time, she wasn't until she met me, although she was aware of it in a sense, in reality, as opposed to just in theory. And so, indeed.
Wow.
So you were then more difficult than raising children is blended families, because when you're raising children, what often happens if the dad isn't involved, the children often feel somewhat dad deprived. Although if there's not a divorce and the father's showing up every night, that minimizes that dad deprivation, even if the dad is not super involved. So one of the things that happens oftentimes is what I call the father's catch-22, which is the dad learns that when children are born, his job is to maybe take a national sales job as opposed to a local sales job. So he learns to love the children by being away from the love of the children. But if there's a significant time with the children, that's extremely helpful. And what the biggest problem often that arises that you've heard me talk about when I describe this in the Boy Crisis book is the differences between dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting. And so when dad does roughhousing, mom is often feeling like, I feel like I have only one more child to monitor here, And when the dad does teasing and the child cries because she or he feels a little criticized, in the teasing process, mom feels that the dad's being really insensitive to the child's feelings and doesn't want the child to cry. And so all of these things I found when I was writing the Boy Crisis book, I had to really explain to parents so that people understood that roughhousing is actually highly correlated with empathy. It's highly correlated with postponed gratification, all the things that we talked about in the other podcast, and that really helps for dads to know that and to be able to share that with moms, because moms can't hear what dads don't say. So those conflicts come up when there is children born. But you magnify those conflicts probably by 3 or 4 when there's a blended family. Because the blended family, almost each parent feels that the other parent is not treating their children with the same type of love and respect that they're treating their own children, that there's favoritism. And so you have the conflicts between male and female upbringing, combined with the differences between favoritism that both parents feel. Plus, you're often moving into somebody's home. And that's another issue that is very common to some of the worst things, is that one person moves into the home of the other person. Oftentimes, the wealthier person has the home and the other person doesn't. And then the person who is moving in feels that everything that they want to do, is there any way, sweetie, that we could change this bed? I know you've slept with many women in this bed, and it's sort of at night I don't feel like I'm so special. And then the man changes out all the sheets or something like that, but the woman is feeling, or the vice versa, the person moving in feels that everything is a fight to have that home be just a little bit theirs, whereas the person whose home it is feels like every change being requested is a criticism of who they are. So on the one hand, there's a compliment of the home, and the other hand, there's a change it, make it mine too. And so I really recommend to couples that that even if there's a sacrifice in the quality of the home, in order to improve the quality of the love, find a home that is your home, that you buy together. And I suggest a number of different ways in the Role Mate to Soulmate book to do that. But that's another area. Another area is when one person in the relationship becomes very successful, and the other person is oftentimes supporting that success, but then they go out and somebody is always paying attention to the successful person. Like you're doing this podcast all the time. You may, in certain quarters, like when we go to ARC meetings, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship meetings, you'll be the one when you go with Stephanie to be recognized. And I see your podcast all the time, and it's very easy for Stephanie to be left out of that conversation and feel like she's only a secondary part that's dragged along. Plus, what it takes to be successful at work is often in tension with what it takes to be successful in love. So you have a good lawyer. His or her job is to find the fault in what the opposing attorney is saying. And then in order to do that effectively, she or he has to sort of exaggerate the fault and then argue with the exaggerated version of the fault. And so a good lawyer is self-listening on behalf of his or her client. So that's effective for being a good lawyer. But you take that quality of self-listening and arguing and presenting an alternative story at home to your husband, wife, children, and they feel not listened to, not heard, not drawn out, not facilitated, but they feel like you're sort of thinking of of other thoughts, or it's what I call self-listening, while the child or your spouse is or your partner is talking. And so those are some of the things that really are challenges among many of the couples.
Yeah, you don't want to straw man your beloved's the argument that your beloved is making. You want to do your best to steelman it, to make their argument as clear and cogent as possible, I would assume.
Tell me more about what you mean by that.
Well, when you straw man somebody's argument, you're basically arguing against something that's not really their argument. Mm-hmm. It's a weaker
version of their argument.
Yeah, permutation of their argument
yes.
that makes you seem like the victor.
Yes.
Or where it would be easier to, it's a debate tactic that's a form of rhetoric. It's a very disingenuous debate tactic where, you basically, you malign the other person's argument into something that it's not really. That's not the argument that they're making.
Yes.
Steel manning is making the other person's argument, if they're struggling to clarify it, is to make it more clear for them.
Yes.
Presuming you understand what their argument is.
Good. Okay, let's work with that for a moment. So, yes, making that the lawyer's job is oftentimes to create that straw man's argument and then argue against the straw man, and that is, and so if your children or something are complaining about you, or your spouse is complaining about you, that's a common thing for a lawyer to maybe be habitually trained in order to be successful to do, and that can be extremely damaging. But even if they're the person coming home from work says, I had a really tough day at work, and so this is very typical between a husband and wife. The woman will say, I had a really tough day at work, and we guys are going into sort of savior mode, and the best intent of savior mode is, if my wife is bleeding, my job is to save her from bleeding, so I have to get the Band-Aid on there as soon as I possibly can. I love her. Anybody that did anything less than that would be you could do all the hobble gobbles, I love you, stuff in the world.
You got to stop the bleeding.
You got to stop the bleeding. That's what a good husband does. But when it comes to a woman in particular expressing her feelings, she doesn't want that. The solution is to just hear her and then share what you heard her say, and then check it out whether you've distorted anything about that, and then when she finishes talking, so hold that space for her, and when she finishes talking, just let there be some space after that rather than coming in with that Band-Aid. So particularly when I'm working with CEOs, what I have to basically say is yes, you do need to solve the problem. You solve the problem by shutting your mouth, opening your ears, and hearing the problem, and having empathy for the problem. That's the solution. That's what makes her feel loved. Now, that's also true in reverse, but it's not as 100% that way in reverse. Women are usually a bit better at listening to the man's problems, and the man is oftentimes doesn't express his feelings about them to begin with. And that's another set of problems in communication, is that men often learn to sort of that if I'm going to share my problems, I have a couple of ways of doing it. I can share it with another man, and he'll lose respect for me. I can share it with my wife or woman friend. She'll lose respect for me. So what's the incentive here of sharing my real feelings? And a man knows that, particularly with a woman, it's very rare for a woman to love a man she doesn't respect. So if I share feelings that show vulnerability, she'll lose respect, therefore lose love, because he's never seen a woman before love a man she doesn't respect.
Men typically don't love can't sustain love for women that they don't respect.
They can, to a greater degree, because they feel they have a purpose of saving her, and supporting her, and they're looked up to by, let's say, she's not good at math, she's not good at maybe this part of raising children. Okay, I have a role here. I can come into the man on the white horse and save her. Now, in the process, he may not actually respect her as much as he respects himself or feels that she respects him.
Oh.
And so it isn't quite true in reverse.
Wow, very interesting.
Or it's more nuanced in reverse.
Yeah.
If you will.
In your book, you argue that falling in love is biologically natural, but sustaining love is not as natural.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Yes, falling in love is not biologically natural because of what I was mentioning before about the biologically you suspect, fear an enemy, and then you build up your defenses in response to the enemy, and that's biologically natural, is to be defensive. And sustaining love is not biologically natural because when you're defensive, is in response to a concern or a criticism, or you are undermining love. And what the single biggest complaint for many couples is, Dr. Farrell, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time around my partner, always waiting for the right moment to say something, and then with women, they at least will be able to say those things to their women friends. With guys, we usually just keep the feelings to ourselves until we just drink instead, or or make ourselves distant instead. Sometimes in the workshops, I have a really hard time with the men being able to do this because, and it's almost always men who have previously been married, and they've learned that when I say anything that's critical of my wife, I get a punishment that's way beyond what I feel I will get as a reward for sharing the criticism. A, I don't feel heard, and B, my wife withdraws sexually, she withdraws emotionally, she's not around, she's not supportive. Everything I value in her just starts disappearing the moment I say any criticism. Therefore, I will keep my mouth shut. And we guys don't go out, if we're playing golf or whatever, we don't go out and talk negatively about the women in the process of doing that. It's just considered like, what's the matter with you? That's really cruel to say that type of thing about your wife. That isn't true in reverse. Women will, if one woman says that she's having a problem with her husband or a boyfriend, the other women will usually chime in and say, "Oh yeah, I have the same type of problem with my boyfriend or my husband," and the method among women will be to support her by showing commonalities, that you're not alone. You're not alone, sister. We girls, we women all have that problem.
How do we maintain an appreciative relationship with somebody or something that's always around? I feel like that's one of the pitfalls of the human condition.
Well, first of all, it is a pitfall of the human condition, and I have in the Role Mate to Soulmate book sort of what I call the 4 depleters of love, and one of those depleters is complacency. And so, you think about this, it is almost like, smile amusing. You're thinking about your first date, meet somebody at Match.com or whatever, and you're
Raya.
saying, what's that?
Raya, Hinge.
Yes, eHarmony. By the way,
J-Date.
The 2 most successful, what I've seen in my workshops, is that about 60% of the people who meet and have long-term relationships meet either on Match.com or eHarmony. And eHarmony has an extensive questionnaire that if you really fill it out honestly, the algorithm will really give you usually a good outcome. Now, it's not that these people don't get into challenging relationships, but they certainly do have a these tend to work fairly well for them. Now, you asked a question. I'm trying to think about where that question...
How do you maintain
Oh, complacency. Yes.
Well,
was the-
yes.
Yes.
So you were getting into that.
One of the 4 depleters of love is complacency. And so you think about you're preparing for this first date that you on Match.com or whatever, and you're thinking, well, what's the best wardrobe? If you have a friend or a girlfriend or something like that, you might check the best wardrobe out, and if not, you at least check out the mirror, your second best friend, and they sort of then you look up makeup and the way you're holding yourself, what you're going to say, how you're going to present yourself. You're thinking about all these things, and then you get all that preparation done, and you go on your first date. And then 2 or 3 years later, you're maybe moved in with each other, and you're sort of, no makeup. There's, maybe the hair could be a mess. Maybe
You've let yourself go.
You let yourself go. Yes, you've gained 30 pounds. You're, that all this type of thing, and sort of maybe not wearing pajamas around the house, but sort of things that are very sloppy. But then you change. You're going out on Saturday night. Start looking at that wardrobe again. For somebody else you're going to present yourself to, you're now worried about how you look. And so now, on the one hand, this is really a positive that that you can feel comfortable around this person. That's a positive. On the other hand, there's oftentimes a sort of like a little residual of the only time you seem to care about how you look and how you present yourself, and you give your best foot to the other people rather than to me, and that can begin to make a relationship go downhill. And so that's one of the 4 depleters of love is complacency.
Yeah, the textbook example that you hear a lot about is couples that leave the door open when they go to the bathroom in the later stages of a relationship. When people post, I've seen posts in regards to that on social media, Instagram. First place I go is to the comments, and you see the polarity. Some people are like echoing exactly what you said. Well, there's a beauty in being so comfortable with another human, right? But on the other hand, some things are better left to one's private life.
Yes, exactly. You can imagine going on a first date. You bring this woman or guy back to your house, or your 2 men or whatever, and 2 women, and you say, just a minute, I need to use the restroom, and you leave the door open, and they hear you. It's like, gee, they really prepared me for that first lovemaking.
So funny. You talk about the concept of play in your book too. That the couples that what did you say? The couples that play together stay together.
Yes, there's research showing that couples that play together stay together longer, and so examples of play together. For Liz and I, sometimes we'll just sort of be cooking or something like that, and I'll hear a little bit of music that I'm liking, and especially if it's high energy music, it's really fun to just sort of turn that music up and just forget about let the food get cold, just do some dancing together.
I like it. The Farrell's letting loose.
Yeah, letting loose. Yes, sir. Imagine.
It's adorable.
Right.
So that's an important part of sustaining love, I would imagine.
Yes, Liz and I have in our dining room, we have a small foosball game, and it's it's very fast, and it's the game is fast. We aren't, but you go back and forth, and it's really fun, and we have a ping pong deck outside, and so all those things are just ping pong, as you probably know, increases your IQ.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's because you're constantly having to sort of think, every second.
I've always been terrible at ping pong and any other sport. I don't know what that says about my IQ. But
that means your IQ has plenty of potential for increasing.
Yeah, so, you're right.
Talk about taking things from different angles.
Yeah. But maintaining that childhood sense of wonder whilst in a relationship, it sounds like it definitely sounds like a recipe for success. I try to be, I try to maintain that and let that suffuse everything that I do. That playfulness.
So tell me how that manifests for you.
Well, I think I definitely have a bit of a Peter Pan. There is that side to me where, whether it's through my career choices or my friends, my family, the way that I was raised, I allow play. I try to bring play into everything that it is that I'm doing. My approach towards fitness, hanging out with my friends.
Give an example.
I don't know. Do I have an example? Well, the only example that I could give is I guess my attitude towards play and spontaneity relative to people in my social life who are more rigid. Because I think rigidity is kind of, in a way, the antithesis to playfulness.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of my friends have a very rigid mindset about routine, habit, preferences, a very strong, set of preferences towards foods, or even maybe it's the type of girl that they're into. I've always had a much more like open-minded, playful curiosity about a broad array of things, which I know still sounds vague, but in my view, that kind of embodies a more childlike mindset.
So if somebody says, I'm a vegan, would that still tap into your curiosity and tell me more? And
I'd want to know why they've chosen to be vegan.
Right. And would you want to know why they've chosen to be vegan? Like, how could you be so stupid?
Pretty much.
I felt that a little bit out of your tone of voice, right?
You must listen to my podcast. I would genuinely be curious. I would want to know, is this like a moral decision is it for moral purposes? Is it that you don't like the taste of meat? Is it because when you were 5 you had a piece of sinewy steak that you didn't enjoy, and so now you've carried that narrative that you don't like steak on with you through adulthood, which I think would be a huge shame, but I see people make decisions and choices like that all the time.
Sure.
But yeah, it would invoke in me a curiosity.
Yes. And so the keeping something young is when there's a different decision like that that somebody's made. Maybe your partner is, you really love her, but yet nevertheless she's vegetarian, let's say. And so it would be, especially when you're such an expert on the value of not being a vegetarian and other animal foods, that it would be, the challenge would be to really create that safe space for her to express her feelings about that, and without feeling judged by you, or that type of thing. And at the same time, asking that she create a safe space for you to share the knowledge that you have and the experience that you've come up with, and why you've moved to where you've moved to.
Yeah, my girlfriend, when we first started dating, first date I took her to a steakhouse, and she would only order like well done meat, because she thought that by charring the hell out of meat you were killing off any potential pathogens, parasites, and what have you. And I informed her that the bacteria that you get on meat typically is only on the surface of the meat. You don't really have to char the hell out of meat. It's perfectly safe to, not according to the FDA, you have to cook your meat to a certain temperature, but generally most people enjoy a medium rare steak for a reason. And it's generally pretty safe to do so. She also didn't eat fish. She hadn't eaten sushi in years because she was afraid of parasites. Because you see these horror stories sometimes on social media of people bringing home salmon from the supermarket and seeing all kinds of, weird things. But of course, social media only surfaces the craziest possible stories. And so she was afraid for that purpose. But I informed her that when you eat sushi, particularly at a legitimate establishment, sushi restaurant, they're legally required to flash freeze fish. You're not eating any seafood that's truly raw in the United States.
I didn't actually know that. Right?
Yeah. They're not just like cutting it off the fish and serving it to you in a sushi restaurant. They have to freeze it first, and in so doing, kills off any potential parasites. You might see, the dead remains of which. I'll admit doesn't sound very appetizing, of a parasite here and there, but they don't present any threat to humans.
Yeah,
generally. There are exceptions. People are going to come after me probably for saying that, but generally it's pretty safe. It's pretty safe.
So anyway, the communication part of that is, when you have somebody that comes from a totally different place, really being able to show that curiosity without sort of skepticism in one's tone, and not facilitating the curiosity as a way of getting information that I can argue with. And all of that comes through in the tone of voice. And so anyway, that's a...
Yeah. Are people more lonely today than in previous years, previous decades?
Yes.
Like, are we in fact seeing the epidemic of loneliness that some have talked about?
Yeah, I think we are. I think there's certainly the COVID period, the pandemic period, increased that enormously, and then we also have I was just we were in Del Mar yesterday, Del Mar this morning actually, and yesterday I was out by the pool, and there were a family of 6 people. And all 6 of them were just right on their iPhones. They've come there to spend family time together, and there's sort of a type of isolation that occurs when you're not having that human contact. And there's also an intellectual. You don't pick up the nuances of little tones of voice and little just movements of the body, and just thousands of things that we communicate so very subtly. The way we dress, the way if I come in here like this versus come out like this, if I just say something a little bit louder, a little bit softer, all those nuances do not come through in a text, and so it really creates a type of isolation.
Yeah, it is odd. We've relegated, I think, the vast majority of our communication these days to digital devices and the like. I wonder what future generations who are essentially growing up with these technologies,
yes,
how it's going to impact them and their social abilities. In the book, you offer readers 11 wisdoms to sustain love. We don't have to get into all of them, but what are a few of those wisdoms?
One of the ones that I find very useful is when I hear couples complaining about their partner. I'll say that one of the wisdoms is before you complain about your partner, look in the mirror and ask yourself, exactly why did I choose this partner? The partner that I've chosen is a statement of my values. So sometimes, for example, let's say one partner is really into yoga and spontaneity and holistic thinking, and the other one is a banker or is a lawyer or an engineer. At the beginning, when they first meet each other, the lawyer engineer is just delighted at the spontaneity and the holistic approach and all these things that he or she has never sort of heard before, and the person who's that artist, let's say, is just impressed that this banker is so competent and has earned so much money and is so competent in finances or law or something that she or he is not that good at. And so that can create attraction, and sometimes the opposites attract. However, as they get on into their relationship, let's say the woman is the artist and she starts becoming critical of him for, why don't you try out yoga? And why don't you just, do some type of meditation? And why don't you just sort of relax more? And why don't you just go out and sort of play with me? And conversely, the bank book, the engineer or whatever, is sort of saying like, maybe I'd have time for doing that if I didn't have to support both of us. But just what he has learned or she has learned, if they're a CEO, let's say, as they go through the ranks, is they've learned to develop the routine. They've learned to persist. They've learned to be disciplined, and all that process does not easily give internal permission to be just totally relaxed and to meditate and to be soft and to just spend a few hours listening or a few hours meditating or spending the weekend at a yoga retreat when you should be preparing for the Monday and doing the homework that it takes to get up the ladder. And so rather than criticize the person for being too extreme in the other way, I ask them to look in the mirror and ask what was there about their values that made them choose a partner with such different values. And so to take responsibility first, and then to ask, what are you doing to enable your partner to remain that way? By being supported by this partner, are you encouraging your partner to feel that the way they get love is by continuing to focus on their discipline in order to be able to earn the money to be able to support you? Conversely, if you chose this person who is very much the artist and so on, and what did you appreciate about that person to begin with, that you're now criticizing about that person, and by supplying, let's say, all the money for her or him, are you increasing that propensity just to rely on, to focus on their art and to hang out with a bunch of other artists and maybe fall in love with another artist? And so that's just one wisdom that I ask people to look into.
Are there certain values that are more important to align on than others?
It's a good question. I'd say there probably are, but the crucial issue is no matter what those are, and I'd say an example of values that are more important to align on is the values you have about raising children. Because those not only affect your interaction with each other, but it affects the way you feel controlled or not controlled about what your partner is rewarding or punishing you for in raising the children. Like the dads that roughhouse, the dads that tease, the dads that let their children take risks by, let's say, camping and then walking in the lake to a lake nearby but getting lost, which a mother would usually not feel comfortable allowing the child to do. And then the father looks like he's insensitive or that type of thing. So those values are among the more important values.
Yeah, I would think that if you're not aligned with regard to an appreciation for health, for example, politically, I think that could lead to some difficult dinner time banter. Health, spiritually.
Yes, health is even probably more important than spiritual alliance, because health you have to deal with every day. What do we have for dinner? Is it the steak or is it the vegetarian food? Or, what do we have for dinner? Do we have ice cream for dessert or no dessert at all? Is it okay that we are 70 pounds overweight? Does one person believe that it's, so if you're talking about exercise, one person can exercise and the other not, and there's not a lot of conflict. But dinners are things you often have together, and so that creates and the amount of respect we have for somebody who's overweight, and is overweight not for some biological reason, but overweight because they don't discipline themselves to eat the things that keep their weight at the right level. That can create some disrespect, and that can be pretty powerful. You mentioned something else as an example, health and
spiritual politics.
Politics, yeah. The politics thing. The last part of Role Mate to Soulmate book is a section called From Civil War to Civil Dialogue. And it's taking all of the skill sets, the 7 major secrets to lifelong love that I talk about in Role Mate to Soulmate. It's taking those things that you learn to understand and hear each other and showing couples how to modify those to hear a family member or a colleague at work who has totally different political opinions than you do. And this can be very challenging. Let's say you're a conservative dad, and you've really worked hard to have your daughter be the first one in your family to go to college, and then she comes home at Thanksgiving, and you're really excited to hear what she's learned, and she says, "Oh man, Dad, I really learned that reparations for Black people are really fantastic, and we really need to do that." And the conservative father's feeling, "Wow. You don't give money to people to make them succeed. What type of values are you learning at school?" So what I teach people to do, what I teach couples to do, is to modify that love guarantee, for example, that I was talking about before. If I provide a safe environment for all your feelings and make you secure, you'll feel more loved by me. I change that to, when it's a colleague, to a respect guarantee. But if it's a family member, it can also be a different type of love guarantee. That if I really provide an environment for my daughter to be able to say why she feels reparations are important, then she'll feel really heard rather than criticized. And if I start out with a person that has a different political opinion, including my daughter, but also this one applies to a colleague at work, and I say, okay, we have totally different perspectives. One of us is voting for Trump, the other one is voting for someone wishes there was somebody to the left of Harris. And so what is common in what those two people have? They both care. Neither is apathetic. Caring and not being apathetic is the most important two things to sustain a democracy. So we may be saying the democracy will fall apart, but what's common to conservatives and liberals, even far left and far right, is that usually the farther left or the farther right you are, the more you care, the more your concern is. You're driven for politics to be a significant part of your life. And so those politics may be self-destructive, they may be community destructive, they may on one level be harming a democracy. On the other level, the fact that you care and you're not apathetic are core dimensions of what a democracy is about. And so before you start doing the critical part, let the other person know that you've cared and that you see that they care. And then also appreciate them as a person. So if I were to appreciate you, I would say, look at all the discipline that you put into doing this podcast every day. This is the second podcast you've done today. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of reading. It's apparent to me that you've read Rollmate to Soulmate rather than just sort of like read 3 paragraphs about it. That's a lot of work to put in. Then you don't have the questions written down. That shows that you really have taken them into your heart or into your head in a deeper type of way. You're a really good-looking guy. You could get by with a lot less just on the looks.
I love when you flirt with me, Warren. I love it.
And so those. So now if I were to say that to you, which in a sense I just did, and then talk to you about how much you care and how much that you're not apathetic, and that's core to a democracy. Now, when I ask you to to listen to some perspectives that I have, you don't feel like you're dealing with an enemy to begin with. You feel like you're dealing with somebody that sees you, the appreciations part, and also sees your caring and lack of apathy, and that we may have come to different conclusions about what the value of reparations are, the value of feminism is, the value of vegetarianism is versus eating animal foods.
Yeah.
We may have come to different conclusions about that, but I see you as a good person.
It's finding common ground, yeah.
And finding that common ground, and everybody agrees with finding common ground, but it's usually you have a terrible set of opinions and I have a very good set of opinions, and okay, I've got to make a treaty with you, or I've got to live with you, you're part of my family, or I've got to work with you, you're a colleague. So we'll try to find some common ground here, but it's not like...
I mean, some people do have terrible opinions.
Yeah, well...
What do you make of this whole sleep divorce trend? Are you familiar with that?
Tell me more.
So from The Week, published in June 2024, this is actually a trend that people are now talking about on social media. More couples are taking an unorthodox route to sleeping arrangements and slipping into separate marital beds. The two-bed or two-bedroom trend, known to some as a sleep divorce, is more prominent than one might expect, particularly among younger people who eschew the stigma of sleeping apart. The reason for choosing to sleep separately range from avoiding sleep disturbances like snoring or endless phone scrolling to simply valuing having their own space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we need to be free as a couple to be able to say what works for us. And one person may have trouble sleeping because they like to move around and kick and snore and that type of thing. And it doesn't mean that you can't get together afterwards. Doesn't mean that you can't surprise your partner in the middle of the night and check them out.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to not be judgmental about the arrangement that works best for partners, but the important thing is for the partners to really feel that they can be heard about what works best for them, and check. And if sleep is vital to health and life and living longer and not being depressed and so on, and so anything you can do to help your partners sleep in a way that supports her or him. On the other hand, there may be, the other partner may want to be cuddled, may want the security of being with their partner in bed, may want the intimacy of that. For them, that may be, and they don't have trouble sleeping. So you negotiate. Maybe you sleep separately 4 nights a week, and on the weekends you don't. And so there's all sorts of solutions. And the value to me of role mate to soulmate is, knowing how to process those by hearing your partner's feelings, and knowing that they feel that their entire story is being heard, that they don't just sort of like say, it's really challenging to hear your snoring in the middle of the night. I want to sort of have a separate bedroom or something along those lines, and the other person takes it as rejection.
Yeah, it's not. I'm totally on board with that idea. Sleep is sacred.
Yes.
I I feel like you can only show up as your best self in a relationship, in the work environment, creatively, if you're well slept.
Yes.
And so if you need to sleep in a separate bed in order to achieve that, or even a separate room, I see nothing wrong with it. I don't think it's weird. I think it's weird that there's a stigma on doing so.
And again, the important thing is that one person in the couple may feel like, being hugged and held and having you right there is really important. And the other may feel that sleep is really important. And the important thing is the communication that the two of them do to have them both hear the other's story about the need for that. And then as part of the Role Mate to Soulmate book, I have a chapter on how to create win-win solutions to your stickiest problems. And so let's say one person feels like, that the security of being close to the person, the idea of reaching out in the middle of the night and making love is really crucial for their feeling safe and secure and excited and turned on by their partner. And the other one feels, that the exact opposite way. That once you have felt each person feels heard, then you move into creating win-win solutions. Maybe we can do 3 nights a week sleeping apart, 4 nights a week sleeping together, or vice versa. Maybe we can do we can stay together until 11 o'clock at night, and then and have some fun time first, and then we separate. And so there's so many ways of working things out, but creating win-win solutions means each of you, the method that I present in the Role Mate to Soulmate book to create those win-win solutions is for both people to brainstorm, to say so they sit across from each other and they do a sentence completion exercise. And the sentence completion exercise is one possible solution is 4 nights a week sleeping apart, 3 nights a week sleeping together. Another possible solution is never seeing you, and that's a joke because it's important to have humor in the process of solving problems. Humor stimulates creativity, and so you keep moving on with different possible solutions, and you write down. So if I'm listening to Liz's solutions, I'm going to write down every single thing she says, including the jokes. And then and I'm going to look at her with each one of those is a fantastic idea. That is, I play cheerleader, and she plays the football player, so to speak. And the cheerleader never says, well, hey, what do you say? You could have made a better play. The cheerleader goes, that was he looks at the football player like whatever he did or she did was fantastic. And so you keep writing down those best ideas, and then you reverse that, and the other person comes up with best ideas, and then you rank your best ideas and your partner's best ideas, and then you look over the ones that have the highest ranking, and then the two of you start exploring. There's some possibility here, and you keep working that out, and very high percentage of the time, couples, instead of having this argument, end up having this, there's actually 3 or 4 possibilities here that could work for us.
Super interesting. I was down in Costa Palmas, Mexico with Stephanie a couple months ago, and they put us in a room with one bed, but as soon as we had gotten into the room, we realized that the room must have just been painted or something. There were like fumes in the room, and we just couldn't stay there. So they put us instead in a room with 2 beds. And we both, when we got into the room and we saw that there were 2 beds in it, we were like, I'm actually kind of into this. And we tried it out. And now by default, whenever we travel together and we book a hotel room, I just book it with 2 beds.
Yes. And so what happened that you were able to share?
Well, I slept, we slept amazing. And we generally sleep well together because the way that I sleep, I kind of cocoon myself, flanked by 2 king-size pillows on both sides, and then I sleep with a pillow on top of my head. So I'm like in my own little sleep coffin, and I can't sleep like touching another person. Like I need to be like in my own, solid. And she similarly curls up in her corner of the bed. She's got a sleep mask on. She sleeps with earplugs in, the whole 9. So we generally sleep well together regardless, but having 2 beds is great. I mean, you're not disturbed if the other person gets up in the middle of the night to go pee. But I'll concede that some people do apparently sleep better with their significant others. Like my middle brother, it just goes to show you how different people are. My middle brother, he's single currently, but he was in a relationship, and it was a long-term relationship. And when the relationship, after it had run its course, he shared that he actually slept a lot better with her because they would like essentially sleep on top of one another, which I can't relate to at all. To me, that sounds like an absolute nightmare. But yeah, some people, I guess, enjoy it that way.
And one of the challenges is that there's oftentimes an evolution of stages. And so at the beginning, you want to be with each other. You want to be touching each other all the time. You want to be having sex all the time. And so there's a real excitement to the flesh of the other person. And then later, as you begin to feel like, well, I really want to have some separate space and stuff like that, it feels like a statement of I love you less, or I'm less attracted to you. And it may be that, but it also may be just what is needed at that stage in the relationship. And that's why the communication about that and seeing and hearing each other's perspectives is what is happening, rather than assume it's rejection, saying that, and figuring out, well, maybe it really helps for me to have some cuddle up time with you at the beginning night. Maybe we need to do that. And so let's have up until X amount of time before we have to wake up to do that type of thing. And so you start figuring out for the 2 of you what's best for you. And the only right answer is that.
Yeah, what's best for the 2 of you.
Yes.
Yeah. Super interesting.
But of course, if you have children, or one person wants to sleep with their dog, then you get other complications that also need to be solved with those complexities as to what does you sleeping with the dog between us mean to me? What is you sleeping with the child between us mean to you, mean to me?
Yeah, I formerly used to sleep with my cat, allow my cat into my bed and sleep there, but as of about a year ago, she gets locked out because she wakes me up 5 a.m, and I realize that I value my sleep more than I value allowing her to sleep with me.
Yes,
not more than I value her. I love her to death, to no end. But yeah, sleep is incredibly, incredibly important. It's I think the most important. It's one of the most important, probably top 3 health variables.
Oh yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Maybe even the most.
I'd say probably the most. But I mean, exercise and sleep; those are.
Yeah, if you're not sleeping well,
And then food.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well said. Well, where can people learn more about you? Where can they buy your book? Where can they connect with you on social media?
At the moment, Amazon has it 30% off, and so just going to Amazon and getting it there. If you have a bit more money, support a local bookstore, even though you won't get the 30% off. And
we love supporting local independent bookstores, but they tend to be sold. Our books tend to be sold at MSRP.
Yes, exactly.
But it's always, I think, more valuable.
Yes, and many people, the book is very inexpensive to begin with, so it's not that big a deal. But one of the things about Amazon is that you, A, get it 30% off, and B, it gets sent to you the next day. You don't have to go out shopping for it, et cetera, et cetera. And then with the other option, too, is if somebody goes to my website, warrenfarrell.com, they'll probably see that there's an online video course that one can do in conjunction with reading the book. But I feel so strongly about the online video course that I made the video course only $97, more than half price off. When somebody buys the book, it's actually cheaper to buy the course. By buying the book, you get the course for well under what you would pay for just the course alone. But I do encourage you not just to read the Role Mate to Soulmate book, but also with your partner, do the course online video first. It's 7 hours you set aside, part of a weekend. Do it together and then read the book. And the two of those things will really the book gives you depth and breadth that the online video does not give you. The online video encourages you to actually sit down with your partner and do all the experiences and exercises like the win-win solution, the caring and sharing. The other side of the caring and sharing is doing a conflict-free zone. It teaches you how to do that conflict-free, how to sustain a conflict-free zone during the entire week. And so that when a conflict comes up, you know how to transfer that conflict to the caring and sharing time, that you can really hear the person. You'll be heard by your partner. And so what do you do to sustain that conflict-free zone for all the times that when you're not in that caring and sharing process?
Love it. Well, relationships are hard, so I'm so grateful to you for putting out this roadmap.
Thank you.
To fostering healthier ones.
Thank you.
It's crucial. Yeah. Last question that gets asked everybody on the show. What does living a genius life mean to you?
Actually, I didn't answer this way when you asked me that question at the end of the Boy Crisis book, but living a genius life probably is closer for me to doing everything in Role Mate to Soulmate, actually doing it in my own life. Because when I do it with Liz, I feel closer and closer to her. That's the backstop of genius life for me.
Oh, man, so sweet. You're the man, Warren. Thank you so much. Yeah, you do such important work, and so brave too. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Too.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.